clergy in Russia was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever you're watching, what time it is, when you've decided to be a member of this audience. You know, it's play on demand, isn't it? So could be any time. Anyway, we have just one wise, witty, and I don't think sweaty person this time. He's laughing.
A bit cold here in North England. It's a lot of snow around, and so it's yeah.
Definitely not sweaty then. That was last week, wasn't it?
Well, that was Tertia last week, wasn't it?
That was South Africa, wasn't it? Yeah. So she's been having load shedding. You know, in South Africa they have to share out the electricity in little bits. You can have some now. It's my turn to have some later. You know, so I don't expect she'll be able to turn up. But anyway, we can do a good job on our own, can't we, Guy?
Yeah, we certainly can. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So the first item of news I want you to react to is another pro-Palestinian demonstration march in London last week. Now, you may remember that the first London march was on Armistice Day, when more than 100 counter-protesters were arrested. This because the protest attracted some counter-protesters who got quite rough, and they were arrested. But this time, the police said only 15 people were arrested because the overwhelming majority protested lawfully. That's definitely an improvement, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I would like to focus not so much on the fringes that get arrested as on the issues of the need for a ceasefire and a just settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has now gone on for 75 years or more.
Yes.
And really, they both sides seem to have their heads stuck in firmly in the sand as far as reaching out and finding a just peace that satisfies the legitimate demands of both sides. And I think I like to think that's what the demonstrations, which have been happening all over the country, not just in London. Yes. I mean, we've had regular, almost certainly weekly, maybe even twice weekly, because there's been demonstrations both in Manchester Centre, but also in Oldham. Been regular demonstrations.
And you have a Jewish community, don't you? Not far away.
Well, we have a Jewish community in the North Manchester and Bury area, Salford area. They're all sort of, it's not exactly a ghetto, but they tend to sort of congregate in one particular area.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so
that's what I'm concerned about here, and so the problem is that I'm sort of concerned that there's a lot of people who only see the problem from the Palestinian point of view, and I just don't think that's right. It goes beyond them. I mean, I think both sides have a legitimate case to put, and legitimate, human needs to address.
Not only that, they are both, in my mind, equally guilty of atrocities in their
as
a result of their grievances. Yeah. So what we have here is two tribes who are sworn to exterminate one another. If you've read their scriptures,
Yeah, and I mean Hamas are quite open about it. But the Israelis are not far short of that, in some of their language. It's pretty worrying. And their conduct over these last many decades has been to ethnically cleanse and seize land. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
It's gone.
Yes. So what do you think are the chances? I mean, at the moment, it seems that calling for a permanent ceasefire would not result in parity
There's
because
never going to be parity in this case because Israel is so much stronger and powerful in terms of military might. I mean, the little rockets that the
mm,
Palestinians managed to put up cause minimal damage. I mean, you know, it's not nothing, but the bombs that the Israelis drop, you know, cause massive craters. I mean, they do a huge amount of damage. You know, that
yes,
you can just see it in that sense alone. But I mean, you know, I sympathise with both sides. I sympathise
yes,
with the Israelis. You can't really tolerate a terrorist state, as it were, which is what they think you know it is,
yes.
attacking you every five
So
minutes.
do we. So do we,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, the
Well, so
UK,
do yeah,
the
so does the
government,
government. Yeah.
yes, thinks
But I
that
mean,
Hamas is a terrorist organization.
but I mean, neither can the Palestinians tolerate what the Israelis have been doing for the last 70 years. So,
Yes,
and I mean,
yes,
every so-called terrorist movement, you know, when it comes to a settlement, you have to talk to them, you have to recognize them, and you have
yes,
to rehabilitate them. You know, it's happened with the IRA, it happened with the ANC in South Africa. You know,
yes,
wherever that happens, you know, you can't just sit back. It's happened also in places like Kenya. You know,
yes, yes. You've got to talk.
you've got to
The
talk to
sides
them.
have got to talk. Yes, George
Yeah.
Orwell is better than War,
Well, yes, obviously, yeah.
with
Anyway,
apologies, to Winston Churchill.
yeah,
Yeah, but at the moment, what we've got is, as you say, a disparity. One extremely powerful, militarized nation.
yep.
But wouldn't you think that if you were the the underdog, you'd be wary of poking this bear? I mean, what
Yeah,
what's
yeah, but I mean, I think they're desperate. You know, they. What do they do? Because decade after decade, it just gets worse, and they feel powerless. They are powerless, and they appear to have quite a lot of public support as well. It's difficult to tell
yeah?
in a place like that. Yeah,
Mm. Well, I don't think we're going to sort it out tonight.
no, no.
So it's spilled out the the conflict between the Muslim community and what you might call the Western democratic, I don't know, Judeo-Christian tradition. I'm at a loss for describing it really. That conflict is spilling outside of these war zones, isn't it? Because um, in I think it was in Paris, there were French patriots marching down the streets, and they were calling out Islam out of Europe.
Mm.
And this is not unusual. You know, there are things like this going on in lots of European countries, and it looks as though we're on the edge of an extreme inter-community conflict.
Yes, and this comes down to the whole question of of many Muslims take the view that Islamic Sharia law is more you know trumps national law
Yes.
and national standards. We can't have that.
No.
And so, insofar as they seriously say that and pursue it, then yes, Islam has got to be out of Europe.
Yes.
You know, I mean, they're playing into the hands of the right wing here. They're playing
Yes.
into the hands of Geert Wilders,
Yes.
and you know, and the similar people around Europe. We cannot
Yeah.
tolerate an ideology that seriously is not going to obey the law.
That's right. Yes. If they
Yeah,
didn't, why are they here? Is the question that's on everybody's lips. You know, they've come
yeah,
because they
yeah.
admire. They had presumably because they admire the civilization that we've developed. So why do they want to change it?
Well, I mean, I think many have come because you know life is hard in their countries of origin, and they think they can do better here, and probably have done better here. But I mean,
Well,
and there are many of them who do abide by our law and want to, promote Islam as a peaceful religion,
absolutely.
notwithstanding whatever the Quran and other scriptures actually say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, on Friday, I went and had an echocardiogram because, they check up on me every year, and it's my time to be
Well, to make
investigated.
sure you've got a heart still beating, sort of thing.
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah. Well, as you may remember, I've got an artificial aortic valve.
All right.
I mean, perhaps you didn't know, but I have, and I've been kept alive by it for the last 9 years.
All right.
But they have to check up on me that it's still working. You see, because it's not a renewable human piece of tissue.
No.
So I have to be monitored. And I was given an echocardiogram by a lovely lady in a hijab who spoke with a German or East European accent, and so I don't feel that she's a threat. But as you say, it's the fundamentalists that have come in along with these moderates that are harmless.
Yeah.
And they're the ones, and maybe it's only a small nucleus, but they're the ones who continue the Islamic ideology and the ambition to assert governmental control. And I saw what would it have been described as? A sort of a prediction that shows it was. I must find it somewhere and save it, because it was it explained the perspective of Islamic occupancy of a Western population, and at 2% level they were fine. They just entered into trade agreements. They owned shops and things like that. Then it went up, and they gave this article gave examples of countries that were at that Islamic immigration level. And the next level, and it said, was something like 5%. At 5%, they start to become councillors and members of governing bodies and such like. And so they become, what you might say, politically active. And then at 8, and meanwhile, of course, they're breeding at a much faster rate than any native European population. And then at 8%, they get more assertive and start spouting hate speech from their mosques and things like that. And eventually, 16%, it was deemed and each level, there was countries, an example of countries which were at this level where that particular policy strategy was being experienced. And then at 16%, it suggested that Shariaification was inevitable.
Yes, this is a concern, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you can understand it from their point of view. That's just a natural progress of advance from for their from their point of view. But it's not the same. I mean, for those of us who are trying to defend our values, it's a problem.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Wilders, and he's, as you know, he's been. He won effectively the election with his party, his leader of the PVV in the Netherlands. And he's, of course, because it's proportional representation, he's trying to find a coalition partners. And we talked a bit about this last week. But he's been interviewed. Actually, this is an old interview, but I'm going to play it because at that time, he was quite forthright about his intentions. And this is why he's finding it difficult to get coalition partners. Listen to this.
Right, okay.
Have as a guest, and when the guest should leave, you are independent to do that. We are not able to do that anymore.
So you're talking about immigration?
I'm talking about immigration. I mean, and I believe that every democracy needs a nation state. Needs a nation state, a country of its own, where people around their own flag can rally and have their own identity. You know, a nation state is exactly what the European Union wants to get rid of.
But, you know, coming here to meet you, even the past couple of hours, as I walk the streets in The Hague, you're not going to be able to turn back the tide of immigration. It is part of the Netherlands now. I mean, it's part of its identity.
I'm not saying that I want to build a wall around the Netherlands, but at least we should be able to decide ourselves from which countries we want immigrants and from which countries we don't want immigrants. It's impossible to do that today without the consent of Brussels.
Say you became Prime Minister, would you cater to your Muslim constituency?
The first thing I would do is not only leave the Netherlands, leave the European Union, but also stop the immigration from Islamic countries, which doesn't mean that the Muslims that are in Holland today should leave. Everybody who is already in my country today and everybody who adheres and confirms its behavior to our constitution, our law, our rule of law, and our civil society is welcome to stay and equal as anybody else. But since my party believes, and millions of people who support us today, that Islam and freedom, Islam and democracy are incompatible, indeed, without saying that all Muslims are bad people, we would want to stop the immigration and the import of more people from Islamic countries. We will do that the same day.
That you use fear.
If we want to be a sovereign country again, we need to get rid of this institution that became very multilateral and very political instead of economical, how it started.
But why not be inside? Why not try and reform or make change along with the other member nations? I mean, you're going to have to do.
Well, he goes on to talk about his wish to leave the EU then, but there he expressed a view which is becoming increasingly prevalent in the right wing of several European countries, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Geert Wilders is that he's actually not right-wing when it comes to nearly every other policy. He's actually quite progressive when it comes to things like education and benefits and you know, equality. All of these things, he would stand up as probably a centrist, I should say.
Yeah.
It's only in relation to this one area, which he sees as actually necessary to change in order to protect, you know, the progressive nature of Dutch society. And I think he has a point, and this is what's worrying me, you know, about our politics.
Yes.
And but the other thing is that, of course, under the Dutch system, if he manages, and it's a big if, to put together a coalition, because most of the other parties don't want to have anything to do with him. But if he does manage to put together a coalition which has a majority, it won't be on the basis of his more xenophobic type policies or Islam. You know, I don't want to use that term.
Anti-Islam.
Yeah, that's right. But anti-Islam is, you know, I think they'll have to water them down quite a lot.
Yes.
And the other parties certainly won't be going along with leaving the EU.
No.
So the questioner's question about, well, why don't you work from within? I think that's an interesting question. I think perhaps it's worth the European Union looking again at their own immigration policies.
Yes.
And seeing whether that perhaps that you know, they should be adjusted in some way. It is difficult.
So you don't think that the EU is likely to be taken over by a wave of other exits then, you know, Frexit and Grexit and...
Well, I mean, the thing is, what he's saying is not dissimilar from what other parties are saying in Austria, in Poland and Hungary. You know, there's lots of people, and of course Marine Le Pen in France. There's lots of people saying, and the woman in Italy, whose name I've forgotten, Giorgia Meloni. That's it. Yeah. So there's actually quite a you know, an upsurge of concern that reflects Geert Wilders' point of view, and it's not a point of view that can be dismissed as right wing anymore. I think it's now mainstream, and I think the mainstream political parties of the European continent, including Britain, must think about this and try and get the position. I don't know. I really don't know how they're going to do it, but they've got to sort of address it somehow.
It does look as though the whole of the Western world is moving slightly rightwards.
Yeah, I mean, I wish the Islamic people in the Muslim sort of communities in the UK, could be stronger in supporting human rights and objecting to and really marginalizing the gay haters and the people who want jihad and who want to murder their fellow citizens and commit bombings in the Manchester Arena and places like that. We just cannot have that. And the more they do it, the more they're going to find themselves, facing Geert Wilders and similar political movements.
Yes. We want them westernized. I mean,
well, that would be lovely if they could. Nobody objects to anybody believing anything as long as it's within the framework of human rights and equality and respect for other people.
Yes. Isn't that why they are here? Because, we've developed this attractive civilization.
Well, I think they're here mainly for economic reasons, but then our economic success, insofar as we are economically successful, is linked to our civil freedoms.
Yes.
And I think the economic backwaters of some sadly Islamic countries is linked to their authoritarian and rather sort of retrogressive sort of social policies.
That's right.
Yeah, sadly, that's my view. I mean, I may be wrong about that, obviously.
No, I agree with you. It looks, in fact, if you just look at the correlation, the Islamic countries are the poor ones, and the Western countries are the rich ones.
Yeah, I mean, there are exceptions, such as the Gulf states who've got loads of oil. Yeah.
Or they're extenuating circumstances in their case.
Yeah.
So moving on to, of all places, Vermont in the US of A. I don't know if you know Vermont, but it's a forested state, and it's not very densely populated, and they do have quite a high gun ownership, but it's because they have bears to defend themselves from, And anyway, it's unusual for it to be in the figures for murder, but one 48-year-old man pleaded not guilty. That's hardly surprising, to the attempted murder of the shooting of 3 men of Palestinian descent. This was in near the University of Vermont in Burlington, and he was arrested near the site of the shooting, and he is the accused. And the men that he shot were 3 Palestinian men who were speaking Arabic at the time, and 2 of them were wearing a keffiyeh, a traditional scarf, when they were shot.
Yeah.
And they were all visiting the home of one of their relatives over the Thanksgiving holiday.
Right.
When he confronted them, or the accused confronted them with a gun and fired at least 4 rounds and then fled.
What was his reason?
Well, he I'm not sure, because he's denying guilt. I'm not sure whether we actually know what his motivation was, but we do know that 2 of the victims were shot in the torso, while the 3rd was hit in his lower extremities, I guess in his legs. And the 2 are in a stable condition, while the 3rd sustained more serious injuries. But the thing is, this comes as the US is dealing with a surge in Islamophobic and anti-Semitic incidents, including violent assaults and online harassment, since October the 7th, when the
Yeah.
Hamas invasion of Israel took place. And the FBI has warned of potential attacks by homegrown violent extremists.
Mm.
So there you go.
Yeah.
We are
Well,
a globe.
I mean, if he's pleaded not guilty, he's going to have to come up with, you know, some defences in law. So it'll be interesting to see what they are.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't fancy his chances, really.
But I mean, this is the effect of a war like this, but you know, in the Middle East, it generates passions all around the world.
It does now. We're
causes these
global.
kind of things. Yeah.
We're global. It's thanks to, you know, combination of transport in the jumbo jet and the internet, which enables us to communicate instantly with everywhere.
Yeah.
Unless they're asleep, like Australia.
Yeah. But they wake up though, and it happens there as well.
Yes, yes. So, coming to the UK, St Andrews University, and a couple of years ago, probably more now, I spoke there in a debate against a Christian on the subject of what was the topic? I can't remember what the topic. It was one of those "Can we be good without God?" or that sort of topic. Anyway, the university, St Andrews, that's where the golf course is, the famous golf course is, I believe. The town is pretty much all university. It's one of those university towns, and not a lot else apart from a golf course. Not a lot else happens there apart from academia. So, lovely. I'm I'm going off script here, but it's a lovely Scottish stone built, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's happened is they've got a new rector at St Andrews University, Stella Maris, and she opened her mouth. Basically, I think it was in an email or in one of the multimedias that we have these days, but she described the Palestinians as having suffered apartheid, siege, illegal occupation, and collective punishment. That was followed by hundreds of students demanding that she should retract her remarks or resign.
I mean, but I mean, I think she's correct. I mean, they have. I mean, apartheid, illegal occupation. What were the other ones? Siege. Yeah. These are all collective. I'm not sure about collective punishment. Yeah, I think collective punishment. Yeah. What I think isn't the case is that I don't think there's any evidence that Israel really wants to. I mean, there are individuals saying unhelpful things, but I don't think Israel is actually going for genocide. Ethnic cleansing, yes, but genocide, you know, for instance, you don't send leaflets, you know, fluttering down into Gaza, telling people to move out of the way if you're really wanting to exterminate them. You don't do that. So I'm surprised that only 15,000 odd Palestinians have been killed. I'm actually surprised at that, given the extent and seriousness of the bombing. So that does suggest to me that you know that genocide is not what they're about, but certainly siege, collective punishment, apartheid. These things, I'm afraid, are true.
Yes, well, the students objected. I don't know whether they're supporting the other side, the Israeli side, or what, but they objected, called for her resignation. She's only been in post a month.
All right.
The university itself said it was dismayed by her comments, and First Minister Humza Yousaf and Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar, who were taking part in a annual St Andrew's Day trades union congress, and it was a protest which gathered on Glasgow Green. And somebody there, I'm not sure which of those people, said, when they were asked about the comments that the rector of St Andrews had made, said, there are communities, Jewish communities, Muslim communities, who are feeling vulnerable. And all of us have a responsibility to make sure we are simmering down those tensions as opposed to inflaming them. We can do that while very passionately arguing about what's happening in Gaza that's unacceptable.
Mm.
I don't fancy the chances of that message being adopted.
I mean, it's yet another sort of consequence of this war, that people's passions and are aroused, and not necessarily logically either.
No. So, do you think that you can either be a member of a tribe or a supporter of a tribe, either the Jewish tribe or the Muslim tribe, and passionately argue for your side, and yet simultaneously simmer down tensions?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think it might be difficult, because I think the only way to simmer down tensions is to talk in terms, in balanced terms, from an objective, non-partisan point of view, but listening to each side, listening to their pain and suffering, and trying to see the justice of where the justice is required to be established from the point of view of both sides. And that was how the Northern Ireland settlement came about.
Yes.
And it was only the start. In Northern Ireland, for instance, at the moment, still a majority of children are educated in sectarian schools. There is a movement going ahead to establish more non-sectarian schools, and that is slowly building. But it's a long struggle.
Slow is the word, isn't it? Yes. I had an interview with Boyd Cleason, who is the
humanist secretary or worker or something, field agent. I'm not quite sure what his title is.
Yes.
Boyd Sleater. Boyd Sleater.
Sleater. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. He's a good bloke. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So leaping across the world again to Indonesia, where in Jakarta there is a Coldplay concert. Now, Coldplay, they're a big band of the moment. They're famous for tunes like Yellow. Who would have thought it was possible to have a pop hit on the subject of yellow? But they did. And it's a great, great number. Anyway, they are famous for being supportive of the LGBT. I'm reluctant to keep going on with that new
LGBTQ something or other plus.
Yeah.
QIA plus. Yeah.
Yes. I think that the first few are legitimate, LGB, but then I balk at going into T or maybe LGBTQ, and I balk at going into T and I, and we ought to. Anyway, the thing is,
whatever, yeah.
There's a rag bag of people that have been bundled into this, what are we going to call it, nomenclature category. And so these Coldplay is supportive of those people, and the conservative Muslims in Indonesia are against Coldplay, particularly the 212 Brotherhood alumni, whoever they are, who staged a protest against Coldplay's concert.
Mm.
There you go. Religion is rearing its head into music.
Yeah. It's not the first time something similar has happened.
No.
The conservative sort of reactionary forces in these Muslim countries again. That's what it's all about. And it is a problem, and I just really I pity the Muslim or the Indonesian gays. You know, how they manage. I mean, the you know, I take heart from this that over history, Islam has often not been as extreme as it is now
That's
in some
true.
places.
Yeah. Yes.
And I also take heart from the way that communism collapsed in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. It collapsed from within because the people who operated it realized that time was up and that it was hollow and of no use.
Yes.
And I just hope that there comes a time when sufficient Muslims take that view to just stop doing it and stop believing it. And I get the impression that might happen in some of these Muslim countries more quickly than it happens here, because you know, in the West, they have their reasons for maintaining their community loyalty to you know, an identity. Yeah.
The trouble is, there's been false dawns, hasn't there? I mean, do you remember the Arab Spring?
Yeah.
Anyway, leaving off with an area near me, because my nearest cathedral, not counting the Roman Catholic ones, is at Chichester.
Oh,
and
yes.
The BBC Radio 3 Even song sometimes comes from there.
Yeah.
It's a great cathedral. It's well worth, you know, the usual vaulted arches and flying buttresses and everything, and fantastic acoustics inside.
Right.
You know,
right.
my daughter, I think it was that cathedral, she performed with the school choir. You know, and it's well worth a visit from a historical, traditional, musical point of view.
Yeah.
And so the BBC Radio 3 Even song comes from there periodically.
Yeah.
But on the 29th of November, the show, the actual broadcast, was disrupted by activists holding up Chichester Diocese Funds climate chaos signs.
Oh dear.
Now, I'm not sure how disruptive for a radio show holding up a sign is, but
yeah. I mean, the churches. I mean, one of my cousins is actually a church warden or one of these kind of people who help tourists and people like that. That should just, you know, voluntary. She's retired. So that's an interesting little connection there. But so yeah, the reality is that the climate emergency is such an emergency that Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion have been desperately trying to find ways of getting through to the public consciousness to really, and political leaders to really get them to understand they've got to do something and do it fast and do it fully. And Sunak has been he's been humming and hawing. I mean, last week at COP he was sounding good, but before that he was sort of going slow on it. And you think, what the dickens is this guy doing? You know, we need to redouble our efforts.
Yes.
So
he was reneging on the introduction of electric cars, or you know, the sale of non-electric cars, and also on the opening of new oil fields.
Exactly. And coal field. There's a coal field and an oil field. You think, for goodness sakes, we've got to stop all this. So I sympathise with the protesters.
Let me tell you more about these protesters, because one of them is the Reverend Hilary Bond. And she said she took issue with the Chichester Diocese investment in fossil fuels
Yeah.
when most dioceses had divested from that
Yes.
property.
Well,
So,
she's quite right. And
well, listen to what the diocese spokesman said. He said, "We remain committed to working towards a future which does not depend on fossil fuels. We only invest in companies that have a clear strategy aligned with the Paris Agreement goal." So there's no agreement between.
No, I mean the trouble is that large numbers of companies are saying things like this. We're doing it. We've got a strategy, but actually, when it comes down to the pounds and pence, they're still investing in oil fields and so forth like that.
That's right.
The big oil companies are the same. There's a lot of greenwash going around.
Yes,
so,
yes, indeed.
And we've got a battle in Greater Manchester with the Greater Manchester Pension Fund that pays all the pensions of former local authority employees and teachers.
Yeah.
And, there's an ongoing issue and struggle in relation to them.
Not teachers. Not teachers.
Maybe not teachers, but maybe it's just local authority.
As a pensioned teacher, I can tell you that there is no fund. What happens is working teachers have contributions deducted for their pension, and that money is sent to former teachers as the pension. There's no pot of money in between. It's a transfer from working teachers to ex-teachers. You've frozen. Was that so stunning? Oh dear. I think Guy has not. His connection is broken, or his laptop has frozen or something. Anyway, we've come to the end of the show. Oh, he's really gone now. So it's time for me to play the outro. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you belatedly to Guy for being a wise and witty member of the panel of one. Here we go with the outro. Thank you.
Russell was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Carrie Moon drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys?